Have you ever been underestimated? How did it feel when you finally proved them wrong? Tell us your story in the comments. Someone out there might find courage in your words today. It only took 5 minutes for her boss to decide she wasn't good enough. The morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls of the office as Emily stood there, clutching her resume, cheeks burning as his words echoed. "Useless," he said flatly. "You're not going to last here." He didn't even look at her when he said it. Just signed a paper, handed her a stack of files, and waved her away like a mistake he couldn't wait to forget. Her hands shook as she carried the files to her desk. The floor was already buzzing, phones ringing, fingers flying across keyboards, people with headsets barking numbers and orders. And every now and then, someone glanced at her. The new girl. The one he'd already written off. The one they'd already decided wouldn't make it. But Emily didn't sit down. She stood there for a moment, closed her eyes, and took a slow breath. Because what nobody knew, not yet, was that Emily had seen this problem before. And she'd already decided she was going to fix it. Tell me honestly, how would you feel in her place? It's your first day, and your boss calls you useless in front of everyone. Would you break? Or would you fight? Comment below. I want to hear what you'd do. By noon, she'd already memorized half the names in the department. By 2, she'd figured out how the outdated software on her computer worked, and how broken it really was. And by 5, she'd seen exactly what nobody else had been seeing for months. The numbers didn't add up. Somewhere deep in the spreadsheets, something was wrong. Emily stayed late that night, alone in the quiet office while everyone else went home. The lights hummed faintly above her. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, scanning, highlighting, running calculations over and over. And then, she froze. Her heart started racing as she stared at the screen. There it was. The hole. The massive bleeding hole that had been draining the company's profits month after month, hidden so well that nobody, not even the boss himself, had noticed. Emily sat back in her chair, staring at the glowing numbers on the monitor. And for the first time all day, she smiled. Because tomorrow morning, she was going to walk into his office, look him right in the eye, and prove him wrong. The next morning, Emily walked into the office before anyone else. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she headed straight to the corner office. For the first time, she didn't feel nervous. Not even a little. She knocked once. The door swung open and her boss barely glanced up from his papers. "Oh, you're still here," he said dryly. "Didn't expect to see you again after yesterday." Emily didn't flinch. She stepped inside, set a thick printout of spreadsheets on his desk, and said in a calm, steady voice, "You have a leak. A big one. And I know how to stop it." That got his attention. His pen froze mid-signature as his eyes darted up to her. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice suddenly sharper. Emily slid the papers closer to him. "Page 5, she said. For a long moment, all you could hear in the office was the sound of pages flipping. His brow furrowed. His hand gripped the paper tighter. And then, his face went pale. He looked up at her, stunned. "You're telling me this has been here all along?" Emily just nodded. "Yes," she said. "And if you give me 1 week, I'll show you how to fix it." The silence in the office was deafening. People nearby were pretending not to listen, but they were leaning closer. A few even peeked around cubicle walls. Her boss leaned back slowly in his chair, staring at her with a strange expression. Almost respect. He cleared his throat. "Fine," he muttered. 1 week. Then louder. "Everyone back to work." Emily turned and walked out without another word, feeling dozens of eyes on her. What about you? Have you ever been underestimated, told you weren't good enough, only to prove them wrong? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to read them. At her desk, she smiled faintly to herself as the office buzzed back to life. Because she already knew. She wouldn't even need the whole week. By the end of the second day, people had stopped whispering behind her back. By the end of the third, they were leaning closer whenever she spoke. Emily stayed late every night that week, not because she had to, but because she refused to let her plan fail. Her cubicle, once quiet and ignored, was now a constant flurry of activity. People kept coming by to ask questions, to double-check numbers, to see what she was doing that nobody else had thought of. And Emily answered each one with quiet confidence, her fingers flying over her keyboard, her eyes glued to the glowing data on her screen. She set up meetings with departments that had never worked together before. She rewrote outdated procedures that everyone thought were set in stone. She even caught 2 more hidden errors that would have cost the company thousands more. By Friday morning, the buzz in the office was impossible to ignore. Even her boss noticed it. He stood at the edge of the floor, arms folded, watching as his employees gathered around her cubicle. For the first time in years, his staff actually looked excited. And Emily looked completely in control. She handed off the final report to him that afternoon, her chin held high as she said, "It's all fixed. You won't lose another dollar to this leak." He took it without a word, his face unreadable. But everyone else in the office was watching. They all saw the way he glanced at her now. Not with contempt, but something closer to awe. Not one person doubted that she'd done it. Not one person could believe it had taken just 5 days. That night, as the office lights dimmed and the last of her co-workers headed home, Emily stayed behind just a little longer. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city lights, her reflection faint against the glass. And for the first time since she walked into that building, she felt like she belonged there. Like she had nothing left to prove, to him or to anyone. Monday morning came, and the whole office buzzed with nervous energy. Everyone had heard the rumors over the weekend, how the company's biggest client was staying because of what Emily had uncovered. How the board of directors wanted answers. How the boss himself had been forced to rewrite his report overnight. When Emily walked in, heads turned. People actually smiled at her now. A few even whispered her name as she passed. But she didn't smile back. Not yet. Because she knew what was coming. By noon, the entire staff was gathered in the conference room. The air was thick with tension as the boss stood at the head of the table, a thick file in his hands. He cleared his throat. "There's been a development," he began, his voice tight. People shifted in their seats. Emily stood near the back of the room, silent. "The leak we've been battling for nearly a year has been identified and corrected." Murmurs rippled through the room. He glanced at Emily then, just for a second, before looking back at his notes. And it was thanks to one person. Now the murmurs grew louder. Slowly, he set the file down, lifted his eyes, and for the first time, everyone heard him say it. "Emily." Her name rang out like a bell in the silence that followed. "She did what none of us could," he said. "She fixed it. Completely. And she did it in 1 week." The staff broke into applause. But Emily just stood there, her hands folded in front of her, her gaze steady. And as the applause faded, he added quietly, almost to himself, "I misjudged you." Then louder, "Well done." Emily let the faintest smile touch her lips before she nodded and stepped forward. Not just to take her place at the table, but to take the place she'd earned, at the very heart of the company. That evening, as she packed up her desk, co-workers stopped by one to congratulate her, to thank her, to tell her how impressed they were. But Emily only smiled faintly, thinking back to that first morning, and the word he'd used to describe her. Useless. And now, he'd been left speechless. Now it's your turn. Have you ever been told you weren't good enough, only to prove them wrong? How did it feel when they finally noticed? Share your story in the comments, because someone else out there needs to hear it right now.